Hello, today we have in a reading of A Course in Miracles, Chapter 6, I think it's called The Lessons of Love, or something close to that, Section 4, The Only Answer. Remember that the Holy Spirit is the answer, not the question. The ego always speaks first. It is capricious and does not mean its maker well. It believes, and correctly, that its maker may withdraw his support from it at any moment. If it meant you well, it would be glad, as the Holy Spirit will be glad when he has brought you home and you no longer need his guidance. The ego does not regard itself as part of you. Herein lies its primary error, the foundation of its whole thought system. So what stands out here is, it believes, the ego believes. I paused there, so I'm just going to back up a little. The ego believes, and correctly, that its maker may withdraw his support from it at any moment. And this is true. This is the tension of the ego. So whenever I feel stress or tension or fatigue, that's what's going on. I am supporting the ego. But the thing is, I have I don't know if I want to say eternal, but the option of every moment. The option of every moment is I can withdraw my support from the ego. And if I know when I feel fatigue, stress, or tension, or annoyance, or I try to name all the different things because they're all the same thing, stark fear, terror, jealousy, anything, when I feel that, it's just saying, hey, you're attached to this insane imaginary thing called ego. That's the problem. And you can withdraw your support from it right now and see what comes into that space. And if I remember that every time, that the cause of my disquiet is this attachment to the imaginary, and that the real is here to help me, then I practice withdrawing that support. And even if I keep returning, like a bad relationship, even if I keep returning, I can withdraw my support. That's the opportunity of every moment. The ego believes, and correctly, that its maker may withdraw his support from it at any moment. So highlighting here, I am the maker of the ego. And anyone looking at this can make the same claim. There's only one of us. And that's the awakening, the approaching the awakening, the willingness for awakening is the realization, I made the ego. It's my invention. And when I'm attached to it, it is painful or pleasurable. Pain and pleasure are the same thing. So eventually we withdraw our support for that pain, pleasure, back and forth, and we understand there's something beneficial and prior to that pain, pleasure, back and forth that's here for all of us right now. And we start consistently putting our attention there because that feels wonderful. And it's not a wonderful that's part of the good, bad, back and forth of ego. It's something prior to that. It's a remembrance of who we are. Okay, paragraph 2. When God created you, he made you part of him. That is why attack within the kingdom is impossible. You made the ego without love, and so it does not love you. Anything real that we made would be made with love, or created. It would be created, but we made this, we imagined it. It's not real. You could not remain within the kingdom without love, since the kingdom is love. You believe that you are without it. This enables the ego to regard itself as separate and outside its maker, thus speaking for the part of your mind that believes you are separate and outside the mind of God. The ego then raised the first question that was ever asked, but one it can never answer. That question, what are you, was the beginning of doubt. The ego has never answered any question since, although it has raised a great many. The most inventive activities of the ego have never done more than obscure the question, because you have the answer, and the ego is afraid of you. That question, what are you, was the beginning of doubt. So back to when I feel any stress, any tension, any disquiet, any doubt, any fatigue, any physical or emotional pain, however I want to say this, and I say it a lot of different ways to help myself remember it's all the same thing. It's the same doubt that I brought into the picture by inventing ego, which can never be real. So when I'm engaged in doubt, what I'm saying to the ego is, tell me what I am and tell me what everything here is. I'm saying, ego, answer all these questions for me through your thinking and reasoning and evaluating and comparing and judging about what everything is and what everything means and what I like and what I don't like and what others like and what others don't like and the potential for their approving me and disapproving of me and what I should do next and what this life means and what I want to accomplish and what my past means, and let's get into somebody else's business and analyze, and we could go on and on and on and on and on, and that's what we've been doing. So we've been letting the ego answer many, many, many questions, which are the same basic question. What are you? Like, what is all this stuff here and what's going on and what should happen next in time and space? And instead, we can take a rest from all that questioning. That question, what are you, was the beginning of doubt. So within us, there is a certainty. We are all one. There's only one of us. And within us, there's a knowledge and a certainty that never went away about who we are. We don't even have to answer or ask the question. We just know. And we can remember that. We can go back to that knowing place. So every moment is our opportunity to feel if we've left that knowing place and to point ourselves back toward that knowing place, that remembrance of who we are, and to be guided back there. So that question, what are you, was the beginning of doubt. And any state that is uncomfortable or painful is that doubt. It means I've intentionally obscured or forgotten who I am, which is the same as what you are and who you are and what everything is. I've intentionally obscured that. That's the cause of any stress or tension, not something in the world that I invented and all the situations of the world and all the characters in the world, and it's all invented, all imaginary, not real. No, nothing real could be the cause of distress. Only imaginary things can be the cause of doubt and distress. So when I remember that, I'm able to settle back in to focus on what is real. That's the helper here. What is real is what we are, and it's the helper when we're imagining we're something we're not. Okay, paragraph 3. You cannot understand the conflict until you fully understand the basic fact that the ego cannot know anything. The Holy Spirit does not speak first, but he always answers. Everyone has called upon him for help at one time or another and in one way or another, and has been answered. Since the Holy Spirit answers truly, he answers for all time, which means that everyone has the answer now. Isn't that nice to know about everyone? Instead of anything the ego would tell us to think about anybody else, especially positive or negative, that they have the answer and others don't, that they don't have the answer and others do. Everyone has the answer now. Isn't that a beautiful way to remember ourselves? Everyone. So everyone has called upon the Holy Spirit for help at one time or another, and in one way or another, and has been answered. So that's a good thing to remember. We don't have to learn how to call upon the Holy Spirit and to be answered. We've already done that. It's actually in us. It's something we do naturally. And when we start weeding out, okay, I feel this way, it's because I'm believing a thought of ego. What's that thought? Let's bring the thought to the light. Let's let Spirit take over. When we do this and do this and do this and do this and kind of clear away the debris, then we can just see Spirit makes things obvious for us. Spirit helps us be surrounded by a feeling of ease and guidance And spirit is always here, and his spirit is always here for me. It's always here for everyone we call else. That's why we don't have any reason to worry about anyone we call else. When we're worried, we're listening to ego again, but we can always snap out of it and stop and return to sanity. So the Holy Spirit has called upon, or everyone has called upon the Holy Spirit for help at one time or another, and in one way or another, and has been answered. And this is good when we're looking at those we call other. And instead of anything the ego would want to tell us about them, we can remember this is one who has called upon Spirit for help and has been answered. So why can't that be the constant state that they experience? Why can't that be the state that I experience? I don't have to analyze it or try to force it. Just the recognition that everyone has the answer now. Everyone has this open conduit to Spirit. It's not a specialized thing. Opening up that access to everyone helps us open up the access to Spirit, our willingness to be guided by Spirit here in our own experience. Okay, the ego cannot hear the Holy Spirit, but it does believe that part of the mind that made it is against it. It interprets this as a justification for attacking its maker. It believes that the best defense is attack and wants you to believe it. Unless you do believe it, you will not side with it, and the ego feels badly in need of allies, though not of brothers. Perceiving something alien to itself in your mind, the ego turns to the body as its ally, because the body is not part of you. This makes the body the ego's friend. It is an alliance frankly based on separation. If you side with this alliance, you will be afraid because you are siding with an alliance of fear. The ego believes that the best defense is attack and wants you to believe it. Unless you do believe it, you will not side with it, and the ego feels badly in need of allies, though not of brothers. So this is interesting to see. If we feel a need to cozy up to somebody, it's interesting to see, how do I actually feel? Is there a need here? Is there a desperation? Is there a wanting? Is there a wanting to get? Because the ego is going to try to collect allies. But the ego doesn't want brothers. So allies can be a leader when you want a leader, or be a follower when you want a follower. They can match up to your ego in some way, give you something you want from them. But a brother is equal. A brother is your equal, and a brother is loved the same, and a brother is equally loving, and a brother has everything you have right now in terms of what Spirit gives us, which is not of time or space. A brother has equal access to everything that is real right now. The ego doesn't want brothers. The ego wants difference and separation. So that's interesting to look at when I have a moment of disquiet and I'm locating the thought. When I'm allowing ego thinking to be in charge, I want something from you. You serve a purpose for me. And so I want you to be a leader for me, and then it could blame you. Or I want you to be a follower of me and support some idea of a separate identity that is me. So I allow that. I put up with it. I'm the one who doesn't have to put up with egoic thinking being in charge. And I know by how I feel when I'm letting egoic thinking be in charge of my perception. Ego believes that the best defense is attack and wants you to believe it. Unless you do believe it, you will not side with it, and the ego feels badly in need of allies, though not of brothers. So ego believes that the best defense is attack. When I feel tension or disquiet, or a need for you, a need to use you in some way to prop up my idea of me, then I'm believing the ego's idea that the best defense is attack. And I am the one who can withdraw from that. I am the one. So I can take that idea that the best defense is attack, because that's what all tense and stressful thoughts are. And I can take that to the light, and I can just sit here and see what emerges. That's the opportunity all of us have in every moment. Paragraph 5. The ego uses the body to conspire against your mind, and because the ego realizes that its enemy can end them both, your mind, merely by recognizing that they are not part of you, they join in the attack together. This is perhaps the strangest perception of all, if you consider what it really involves. The ego, which is not real, attempts to persuade the mind, which is real, that the mind is the ego's learning device, and further, that the body is more real than the mind is. No one in his right mind could possibly believe this, and no one in his right mind does believe it. The ego, which is not real, attempts to persuade the mind, which is real, that the mind is the ego's learning device, and further, that the body is more real than the mind is. So, what was I going to say here? Oh, mind. In some traditions, mind is used, in some spiritual traditions, the word mind is used to mean ego. In this case, the word mind is pointing toward the idea of right mind, is pointing toward what is prior to time and space, what exists versus what doesn't exist. I could say what existed before ego came, but ego didn't come because ego doesn't exist. So, the real versus the unreal, the right mind is aware of the real. Can I say that? The wrong mind is focused upon the unreal, and you and I are joined in the right mind. We could say we are mind. We could say we're a thought of God. We could say many things about us, but the words will never do the trick. The words can't really sum us up. We're prior to time and space and all ideas of the ego. The ego, which is not real, attempts to persuade the mind, which is real, that the mind is the ego's learning device, and further, that the body is more real than the mind is. So actually, we have a right mind, we have a wrong mind. Right mind is thoughts from spirit. Wrong mind is thoughts from ego. The body isn't real, but anything we made can be used in the service of our healing. So because we are what is in this right mind, we can allow the body to be used in the service of healing rather than in the service of the ego to conspire against ourselves. We can snap out of it. Every moment is the moment to remember to snap out of it and to allow the body to be used in the service of healing. And I think that includes all bodies we perceive too, because all of this is just a perception. And you perceive many bodies, and you can allow everything you perceive to be used in the service of healing. Paragraph 6. Hear then the one answer of the Holy Spirit to all the questions the ego raises. You are a child of God, a priceless part of His kingdom, which He created as part of Him. Nothing else exists, and only this is real. You have chosen a sleep in which you have had bad dreams, but the sleep is not real, and God calls you to awake. There will be nothing left of your dream when you hear Him, because you will awaken. Your dreams contain many of the ego's symbols, and they have confused you. Yet that was only because you were asleep and did not know. When you wake, you will see the truth around you and in you, and you will no longer believe in dreams because they will have no reality for you. Yet the kingdom and all that you have created there will have great reality for you, because they are beautiful and true. You have chosen a sleep in which you have had bad dreams, but the sleep is not real, and God calls you to awake. So you have chosen asleep when I feel stress or tension. That has been my choice. I have chosen asleep, in which ego, a bad dream, and ego is using symbols. And I think it's real. That's what's happening. So when I feel tension and stress, if I remember, I feel it because I have chosen asleep, and I am having a bad dream, and I am letting ego use symbols. That's very different from believing my tension and stress are caused by real and separate things in a real world. And that's the way out, to keep waking up to what's going on, to keep snapping out of it. You have chosen a sleep in which you have had bad dreams, but the sleep is not real, and God calls you to awake. So when I feel fatigue or pain or physical pain, I am having a bad dream. And the ego will rush in and say, but if you don't do anything about the physical pain and blah, 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 and disaster. I mean, we could listen to those thoughts and we could notice how each one of those thoughts feels. But we also can have curiosity when we experience physical pain and go into the middle of it and look at the thoughts associated with it and not leap to any conclusions that are unnecessary. We can be efficient. And same thing for unease or insecurity or jealousy or anger. It's the same thing for any state that we call uncomfortable. And I keep focusing on the feeling states because that is the turning point for choosing in whatever moment that is for you. I choose to face toward the light. I choose to allow the light to guide me. I choose to remember that we're all the light. I choose to let all this nonsense evaporate because it's never been more than nonsense. Okay, where am I? Okay, paragraph 7. In the kingdom, where you are and what you are is perfectly certain. There is no doubt, because the first question was never asked. Having finally been wholly answered, it has never been. Being alone lives in the kingdom where everything lives in God without question. The time spent on questioning in the dream has given way to creation and to its eternity. You are as certain as God because you are as true as He is, but what was once certain in your mind has become only the ability for certainty. There is no doubt because the first question was never asked. So this whole process that seemed to lead to this experience now never happened. And that's something useful to remember when we're in the middle of a perception of something linear. This caused this and that caused this, and now I'm in a situation where I feel this because this real thing has gone wrong. Actually, no. It's a perception, and I can only see what I want to see, so I can own up to that. I wanted to see this, and it's only a perception. And it doesn't have to remain. And I can focus on what's real. It's very safe to focus on what is real. There is no doubt because the first question was never asked. So if you're in the middle of feeling doubt, and yet there is no doubt, that's an interesting situation to find yourself in. But to keep remembering there is something real and there's something unreal, and I only feel what can be called bad when I'm focusing on the unreal as if it is real, then that's a helpful thing to remember because we can keep relaxing into what is actually here for us and sort of waiting to be guided by that instead of the voice to which we're accustomed, the never-ending ego voice that always has a lot of ideas. Paragraph 8. The introduction of abilities into being was the beginning of uncertainty, because abilities are potentials, not accomplishments. Your abilities are useless in the presence of God's accomplishments, and also of yours. Accomplishments are results that have been achieved. When they are perfect, abilities are... I think I skipped a page. I'm going to find it. Okay. When they are perfect, abilities are meaningless. It is curious that the perfect must now be perfected. In fact, it is impossible. Remember, however, that when you put yourself in an impossible situation, you believe that the impossible is possible. Your abilities are useless in the presence of God's accomplishments and also of yours. So your accomplishments and God's accomplishments are the same. The eternal extension of love. And that's difficult to talk about in words, which depend on separate ideas and chopped up things that we can compare to one another. And we just refer to the forever extension of love. It's impossible to chop that up. That's already been accomplished. That's eternal. Your abilities are useless in the presence of God's accomplishments and also of yours. What else does that have to say to me? The ego can place great emphasis on maintaining abilities, acquiring abilities, expanding abilities, and can draw our attention into that. And if it seems to make us happy, that's fine. But when we put our primary attention on noticing how we feel, we can see more and more that with the ego's desire for more and better abilities and skills, for example, that's all the ego is just a desire for more. And how can you have more of what's actually been here the whole time if there's only one thing, just love? Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. So if we rest in that stillness, then we can put that stillness in charge. If we keep remembering to stop and rest in that stillness. Okay, let's see. I went ahead. Paragraph 9. Abilities must be developed before you can use them. This is not true of anything that God created, but it is the kindest solution possible for what you made. In an impossible situation, you can develop your abilities to the point where they can get you out of it. You have a guide to how to develop them, but you have no commander except yourself. This leaves you in charge of the kingdom, with both a guide to find it and a means to keep it. You have a model to follow who will strengthen your command and never detract from it in any way. You therefore retain the central place in your imagined enslavement, which in itself demonstrates that you are not enslaved. You therefore retain the central place in your imagined enslavement, which in itself demonstrates that you are not enslaved. When I feel tension or stress, I believe I'm enslaved. I might think it's because of inclement weather. I did the other day, I believe that. But actually, I believe I'm enslaved. I believe what I'm experiencing is real, and it can limit what I am. And so when I notice that I believe that I am enslaved, there's something I can do about that. I can go back to the stillness, and I can rest. I can take the thought that I am enslaved to the light, I can rest in the stillness. I can let it be my guide. You therefore retain the central place in your imagined enslavement, which in itself demonstrates that you are not enslaved. So if I have the central place in my enslavement, I'm in charge of that. And I can kind of slip out of that enslaved identity whenever I need to, and learn to stay out of it, learn that I don't need that separate, cut off, enslaved identity. I can learn to stay out of it and rest and be guided. Okay, paragraph 10. You are in an impossible situation only because you think it is possible to be in one. You would be in an impossible situation if God showed you your perfection and proved to you that you are wrong. This would demonstrate that the perfect are inadequate to bring themselves to the awareness of their perfection, and thus side with the belief that those who have everything need help and are therefore helpless. This is the kind of reasoning in which the ego engages. God, who knows that his creations are perfect, does not affront them. This would be as impossible as the ego's notion that it has affronted him. This would be as impossible as the ego's notion that it has affronted him. Again, when I feel stress or tension of any kind, this is the belief underneath what I'm believing about the world. I have affronted God. And when I'm busy seeing somebody over there as a wrongdoer, maybe I think my stress or tension is because somebody's talking to me when I don't want to talk. That's a common thing of mine. If you want to talk to me, that's a common complaint in my mind. I don't want to talk, and yet somebody is talking to me. The nerve. So I'm thinking they have affronted God. Really, my belief is that I have. But I wish to see irritants in my experience, so I have a means of seeing somebody else affronting God, not me, because I really believe I have. I believe this world is real, and I made it, and I've sinned against God. And at some level, I know it. I think it to be true. And I think I'm in big trouble, and that's why I would turn away from, if you don't want to say God, say the only thing that's real. There's only one thing, and that's it. But I've imagined other stuff on top of it to block out the only one real thing. And I'll try to see it in you. This sin I think I've committed, I'll try to see it in you, so I don't have to face it in me. That's an old accustomed habit of the ego, but it's nothing more than my own imagination. This would be impossible as the ego's notion that it has affronted him. Yeah, so God does not affront his creations. God affronting his creations would be as impossible as the ego's notion that it has affronted him. That can't happen. Wrongdoing or offense or harm between separate beings, if you're going to separate yourself from God, can't happen because it never existed. It has, however, been imagined, and I am in the middle of a bad dream about it. So the more I remember I am in a bad dream about it, the more I can just stop in that moment of silence and stillness and get things set right in the mind, because the only thing I can experience is what I've already believed. And if I believe that I have affronted God, that's going to be part of my experience. But I don't have to worry about what I'm experiencing, because all it is the effect of a thought I believed. And that's all it is. That's all it can ever be. Okay, paragraph 11. That is why the Holy Spirit never commands. That's nice. No one's bossing me around, or you. That is why the Holy Spirit never commands. To command is to assume inequality, which the Holy Spirit demonstrates does not exist. What a relief. Fidelity to premises is a law of mind, and everything God created is faithful to his laws. Fidelity to other laws is also possible, however, not because the laws are true, but because you made them. What would be gained if God proved to you that you have thought insanely? Can God lose his own certainty? I have frequently said that what you teach you are. Would you have God teach you that you have sinned? If he confronted the self you made with the truth he created for you, what could you be but afraid? You would doubt your right mind, which is the only place where you can find the sanity he gave you. So we go within our own self, our own shared self, and we find that sanity that we have been provided with and that we never lost. Our sanity is shared, and it's always within, and it's always alive, and we can focus on it in any moment. And when I focus on my sanity, I focus on yours. That's why it's so helpful and reassuring. What good is my sanity if everyone I call else is insane? What would be the use of that? But if the only true sanity is shared, and when I focus on it, I focus on what is true, and everybody and everything and every concept I call something other than me, then I'm very safe. Then I'm held in love. What is real? To command is to assume inequality, which the Holy Spirit demonstrates does not exist. So we might want to be guided by the Holy Spirit so we can see, and remembering that Spirit is us and we are unified in it, we can see inequality doesn't exist. Equality, love, light, that's the only thing that's real. It has no opposite, nothing opposes it, but we have imagined an opposition. And our imagining an opposition to what is real is the only problem we can ever have. To command is to assume inequality, which the Holy Spirit demonstrates does not exist. Now, who commands? Ego. Ego definitely commands. And when I'm scared or worried, what I have done is to assume inequality, because I've believed the thoughts the ego has sent me, and the ego's thoughts are based on inequality. And because I believe those thoughts, now I'm perceiving an alignment with them. I'm experiencing an alignment with the thoughts I believed, and that's it. So that's why I have to go back into the mind if I'm scared or worried and say, okay, what thought did you believe? Here it is. This is the cause of your perception right now. This is the cause of your experience right now. Not some other real one in a real world doing a real wrong thing. None of that's all imagined. It's all imagined. But if I go back to the thought, then I really do have the problem. And then knowing there's an entire other set of thoughts that I can also believe that will also cause perception and experience. We have to have this middle ground of the happy dream. We don't just leave the bad dream. We get guided from the bad dream into the happy dream. And how do you dream happily and gently of all your divine siblings? You are given thoughts. We're always given thoughts. There are only two sources for thoughts. And the thoughts are either from spirit or from ego. When we don't feel good, we've believed an ego thought, and we've perceived in accordance with that thought. We've experienced an alignment with that thought, and that's all that's happened. That's all imaginary. We've been in imaginary land. That's all that's happened. But we can go back to spirit and say, hey, it's a better idea that I get my thoughts from you now. Here's the rotten thought I believed, and I didn't like that perception and experience, and now I'm ready for the happy dream. And Spirit will provide that for us. But we are the ones in charge of our journey. We get to decide, am I going to keep believing ego thoughts, or am I going to ask for the replacement? And that replacement is always available to us. Okay. Last paragraph, paragraph 12. God does not teach. To teach is to imply a lack which God knows is not there. God is not conflicted. Teaching aims at change, but God created only the changeless. That's you. You're changeless. The separation was not a loss of perfection, but a failure in communication. Why? Because I blocked communication. Because I had a tiny mad idea. What would not harmony be like? And so I blocked communication, and I'm still indulging in that. But that's okay. A harsh and strident form of communication arose as the ego's voice. It could not shatter the peace of God. Isn't that nice? The ego's voice can never shatter the peace of God, and the peace of God is always available to us. But it could shatter yours. God did not blot it out, because to eradicate it would be to attack it. Being questioned, he did not question. He merely gave the answer. His answer is your teacher. So now we do have need of learning, because we've immersed ourselves in imagination, in the unreal, and we do need a teacher to snap out of it so we can be grateful. Everyone we think of or meet and everything, that's our teacher. And we can be grateful our teacher is here. The separation was not a loss of perfection, but a failure in communication. So you don't have to do anything for your perfection, because it's a pre-existing condition. You can't do anything. You can't lose your perfection. It's not a perfection of time and space or any positive or negative judgments associated with looking at the facets of time and space. Your perfection is prior to that. Your perfection is eternal, and your perfection is shared. So when we get to the point of willingness to remember the perfection of everyone we call else, because there's only one of us, and the only way to remember my perfection is to see and acknowledge and celebrate yours, that's the way home. And to make no exceptions. Ego would give us many reasons to make exceptions. It would take separate characters in the world. It would have us look at their pasts and judge them either especially positively or especially negatively and compare them with each other and say they're different, but it's entirely a lie. And to the extent I'm attached to any of these positive or negative, especially positive or especially negative judgments, I can't see and appreciate and welcome our shared perfection. So what's a moment for? It's to remember the willingness to invite in the sight and the remembrance and the knowledge and the certainty of our shared perfection. Okay. Thank you for your perfection. I'm wishing you happy healing.